took my Ford Escort in for a Warrant of Fitness today, and it's been in storage here for about 6 months, having not been driven. She started first pop, which was quite good, but unfortunately, luckily, my dad noticed there was a fuel leak from one of the fuel lines, so that was just needing to be tightened up a little bit on a C-clamp. So that was okay. So fixed that, and went off and drove and filmed that down to Manukau, and it passed. And went for a bit of a walk whilst they did the inspection on it, and that's at Jasco's Automotive, and they specialise in all sorts of vehicles, from beach hop vehicles, race vehicles, and all sorts, and they do general usual everyday cars as well, but mainly they're good for specialised vehicles. But they've been doing my Warrant of Fitnesses for about 20 years at least, and probably even longer for my dad, so generally I only trust them to do the Ford Escort. So so yeah, made it down there without an issue, but unfortunately on my way back I noticed that I had a bit of a puddle forming at the over the pedals, down on the all over the carpet, which saturated. So I thought, well, what could that be? And then I thought, well, it's not going to be any kind of oil or brake fluid or clutch fluid or anything, because nothing's actually inside the pedals. The master cylinder's outside. So I had a look and I thought, well, I know exactly what that is, because the last thing I was doing on the car was because the last time I drove it I had a really bad oil leak from the rocker cover. So I actually fixed that, and I put a new rocker cover gasket, new sealer and everything on there, and that fixed that issue. But I was a little bit too rough on trying to get the piping off from the heater, from the firewall where it comes through to the heater core. So what has happened is I've damaged the piping going to the heater core, so that actually caused a bad leak. So I'll show you what I've done to get it home. So I drove it back to my house, and I actually have a few of these clamps which you can clamp off brake lines and fuel lines and stuff when you're working on a car. So I used 2 of those and clamped off the piping. So the bit that I was yanking on was through here, and in the 19 years I've owned this car, I've never once had to do anything with the heater mechanism or matrix or anything. Just flush it out and keep good antifreeze in there, so it wouldn't be rust. But I was really yanking on this pipe because I just couldn't get it off. So I was going to cut it, and in the end I just left it on and put the rocker cover back on around the pipe, which was this pipe, which was a bit tricky, but I managed to do it. And unfortunately all that's got to come off. So I had a huge puddle all over the carpet underneath my feet, and so I've put lots of rags and stuff in there. So basically what I've got to do is I've got to take out the fire extinguisher, I've got to take out the passenger seat, and then I've got to take out the center console, which is actually quite tricky to get that out, and then I can pull the front half of the carpet out. And then I've also got to take the heater core matrix out of the car from behind the dashboard, which is quite tricky. And also I've then got to replumb, for the time being, this hose which comes out of the bottom of the block through the manifold down into the top of the water pump here, so it diverts straight out. And yeah, rebuild what's there, put some new bushes in it too because it's really noisy, or re-grease them. Or I've got another one sitting underneath the house at home, so I've got a couple of spare Escort heater matrix. So the only other thing that went wrong today was the alternator packed in, and unfortunately, or more fortunately, I managed to make it all the way back here on the battery charge because it's a nice big battery in the boot, and yeah, so I turned it off and then it wouldn't start again. Just didn't have enough juice to start the engine. So I've got heaps of spare alternators that I've rebuilt over the years. So I've got one of those, or whip one of those on, but the rectifiers and also the voltage regulators tend to go in them, and they get too hot, the solder comes apart, or the vibration rattles the crap out of them. And I've always had a lot of them and spare ones, so I've never really wanted to spend the extra money to do an upgrade to a more expensive, newer type one, because one goes wrong, whip it off and put another one on. So it's no big deal. So they're pretty cheap, and I actually used to rebuild a few and sell them on to other people as well. So you learn these things as you go over the years, and then you get these things reliable and without a problem kind of deal. But when you leave a car parked up for a long period of time, you end up with having issues and things. Of course, it's always good to keep cars going and running. But having said that, I haven't really had any problems with this. I used to drive this car down to Taupo, race it all weekend, and then drive it home. So I've pulled the seat out and I've pulled the center console out, which meant I had to take the stereo out and all unwire that. And I've got it all ready to take the center, the heater core out. I've pulled all the carpet out that was absolutely saturated, so I can give all that a good clean and make sure it's all dry so it won't start rusting through the floor. So that's the floor right there. It was really well done when they did this car. They put nice vinyl down like they did in the factory. So nice vinyl over the metal, did it all properly, and put nice soundproofing in. I've got all proper nice new soundproofing to go in, and I've actually got brand new blue carpet to go in this car as well, because this carpet, it was a bit past its use by date, to be honest. This back part's alright, front part was pretty much gone. So, but what I was thinking about doing is I might actually be turning this back into a road car, which would be quite exciting. Well, it is a road legal car, but getting rid of the roll cage, cutting the roll cage out, and putting some reclinable RS bucket seats or standard seats back in, and putting some standard door cards in, and even taking all this out and reinstating a proper back seat. And I was actually thinking about maybe getting rid of actually having a roll cage that was prefabricated, a half roll cage which was prefabricated, that can be removed and unbolted from the plate, because it's got really big metal plates that the roll cage is actually welded through, which is all Motorsport New Zealand specification. So this had to be done to a specific method that they certify, so all welds couldn't be ground off. They all had to be basically as they were welded, so that they can inspect them and make sure of their integrity, and then they're done properly. And so you're not allowed to finish the welds, grind them off, make them tidy or anything like that. You actually have to keep them as they were welded. So I've had a few friends before say, oh, those welds are a bit, chunky, but that's with the way that they were actually have to be to get them certified. And the plates, the box sections that they were welded on as well, a bit hard to see, get the light in there, they were actually welded right the way through. And I contacted the guy who put the cage in, and he said that don't even think about cutting those out. You're gonna have a hell of a job trying to get those out. It's possible, but it would take hours and hours and hours, and you have to know what you're doing so you don't damage the chassis, because they've been welded directly through to the main structural chassis part of the structural part of the chassis rails. So to cut the cage out, I'd have to take it across the top here and clean all that out flat. So if I ever wanted to have a cage put in again, they can go from that point. Or if I wanted to actually bolt a cage in, then I could go to those points, which is probably just the method that I just keep it as it is. I mean, I can keep it homologated and keep it road legal, but the problem is that you know, I'm actually sort of changed my mind about, you know, I might not do any more motorsport, so I might more use the car for club events, you know, like going out on a club drive, or more for personal use rather than, you know, doing motorsport events, which I've done years and years and years of. And after a while you kind of lose that passion, or it's not as exciting as it used to be, and it gets very expensive, and it takes up a lot of time. So, you know, sometimes you want to use your time differently, but if I put the car back to a spec that I can use more frequently for other things, then, you know, then I can have more enjoyment with the car than I'm getting probably at the moment, because it spends a lot of the time just parked up in storage.